All right, this house in Mount Lake Terrace, Washington is listed at $550,000, and I'm going to talk about what it would look like to buy this house. What would the numbers look like if you're going to be the one buying this house? If you're looking at this house, I'm going to assume you're probably a first-time home buyer. You might not have a ton of cash to bring, maybe some saved up to get you there, but just not a huge amount, not a huge down payment. So we're going to look at two different scenarios and talk through the numbers in each scenario. We're going to look at one scenario. In both of these, we're going to look at a real quote and walk through the numbers. We're going to look at one scenario where you have about $40,000 to bring, total cash all in, that's your down payment and your closing costs. We're going to look at one scenario where you have about $100,000 cash to bring. And so for each scenario, we'll walk through what your monthly payment might look like here with general interest rates where they're at right now at the end of March. We'll talk about how much cash you would need to bring all in. Of course, we're going to look at those two scenarios, but how much is closing costs, how much is down payment, and then we are going to talk about, could you qualify for this house? How much income would you need to be making to qualify for each scenario, for each monthly payment? So I'll walk through that and give you a sense of what that would look like. My name is Landon Buto. I work with Cleveland Street Mortgage. Mortgage brokerage team based in Bothell, Washington. All right, so let's look at these two quotes. And again, both of these, I am assuming you are a first-time home buyer. And then over here in both of these, so there's a lot of different factors that go into figuring out what your interest rate is going to be and what your monthly payment is going to be. Your pricing isn't just your interest rate. There are other components, and those other components are determined by a wide variety of factors. Like are you a first-time home buyer? What's your credit score? Have you had delinquent properties in the past? How much income are you making? Even how much income you're making changes what your pricing, what your interest rate might be sometimes. So the two factors I want you to know that I'm assuming up front that are pretty key are I'm assuming you're a first-time home buyer because that can get you access to a little bit better pricing, programs with a little bit better pricing sometimes. And then also a credit score of 740. That's what I'm assuming up front. So here on the left, this is the 100K scenario, and here on the right, this is the 40K scenario. Let's start with this scenario on the right, the 40K. And what this ends up being, because we need some money left over for closing costs, what this ends up being is we run this at a 5% down scenario. So let's look at the key components here. Obviously, right away, you can see that we ended up with a monthly payment of $4,205, and here are each of the components that is made of. Sorry, there's not actually homeowner's insurance on this one, so you can knock $50 a month off of this. I apologize for that. So this is going to be more like $4,155, but pretty close there. So the four components that this is made of, you have homeowner's insurance. Homeowner's insurance of $150 a month. That's a pretty reasonable estimate. You have to get homeowner's insurance when you get a mortgage, and almost all of the time you are going to pay that through as part of your mortgage payment through escrow. And almost all the time you have to pay that. There is some times where you have some options if you're really interested in doing that yourself for some reason. As far as taxes, this is the actual number that I pulled from the county website on this house, $363 a month. So both of those are going to be the same in both scenarios, you'll see. But then we have mortgage insurance, $122 per month. Now, mortgage insurance is a fee that you have to pay if you put less than 20% down. Sometimes there are programs that let you pay it just as an upfront premium. That is an option sometimes. It doesn't usually make a ton of sense to do it that way, and it's not always an option. So typically that's just paid as part of your monthly payment, $122 a month. As far as, that's going to be determined. You can quickly look over here and see that's lower, $39 a month, because we put a larger down payment in the other scenario. But that's going to be determined by your down payment. It's going to be determined by your credit score. It's a combination of those things, and then just which loan program you end up in. This is a loan program with access to pretty good pricing on mortgage insurance. So this could be significantly higher, especially at a low down payment, like 5% down. And then the last component is principal and interest of $3,520. So all that together would end up being about $4,155 if you take out the HOA. Again, I apologize for leaving that in there. Okay, so you can see down here that was a 5% down scenario at a $550,000 purchase price. We ended up with an interest rate of 7.125% here nearing the end of March. That's not a guaranteed rate. That's not what you're going to end up with exactly, even if you came right now. But that's a good ballpark for where things are at right now. You can see the APR there. And then down here, this is something I wanted to highlight: points or credit. Now, points are a fee you can pay up front to get a lower interest rate, and then credit is a reverse of that. Credit is where the lender says, if you'll take a higher interest rate, pay me more interest on a regular basis, I'll cover some of your closing costs up front. So you can see here, this is a negative number. So we ended up with actually a little bit of credit, negative 1,217. So that means we took a little bit higher interest rate, and this number will be knocked off of closing costs. So I sometimes the rate sheet, basically the way you grab a rate in a loan processing program from our side of things, and the way lenders demonstrate their rate is they don't always put it right at 0 points. And for whatever reason, this was a pretty good distance from 0. So this is you could get a little bit lower rate here, and this is just showing the lender will cover 1,217 of your closing costs if you take this rate, which apparently is a little bit above their par rate at the time that this quote was produced. And then you can see down here other closing costs, 9,842. So that is a little bit lower because it's affected by the credit there from the lender. I would expect this generally to be a little bit higher. It could be here. But if you're being on the conservative side for this price point in our area, you'll probably end up with something closer to $10,000 to $12,000. So that leaves you with a total cash to close, all the cash you're going to have to bring all in, of just under $40,000, $38,452, and that is your down payment plus your closing costs. So that's just something you have to be aware of coming in. Is a lot of people just think of the down payment. I can hit 3% down, I can hit 5% down. Great. Just be mindful of the closing costs. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about the other quote now, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what income it would take to qualify for both of these scenarios. So if you want, you can skip to that. If you're just not going to pay attention to this next one, that's fine. But I'll come back and talk about what income it would take to qualify for this scenario in just 1 second after I walk through this loan. So this loan here is where you have about $100,000 all in. You have $100,000 available for the purchase. And what we end up doing here is a 15% down payment. Now, it would be great to make it 20% down because that would mean we don't have to pay mortgage insurance, but we can't quite make it there with $100,000 at this purchase price. So we made it to 15% down. And again, I apologize, I included homeowners insurance that's not actually on this property. So knock off this 50, that's not part of it, and then you'd knock off 50 from the total payment. So what that leaves us with, the components here, again, the homeowners insurance and the taxes are going to be the same as the other scenario. So you have $150 a month in homeowners insurance and $363 a month in taxes. Those are both dependent on the house. They're not dependent on the loan structure, so those will stay the same. $150 a month is a pretty reasonable estimate. That is just an estimate. The taxes we did pull from the county website from this specific property. But the homeowners insurance is just an estimate. You might end up a little bit below that, probably. You might end up a little above it. It just depends on your insurance provider and your coverage, how much you're getting covered. And then the other component here is mortgage insurance, and again, you can see that's significantly lower than the other scenario because you've made it to a much higher down payment, so you are a lower risk, so it's less costly to cover your risk. But again, mortgage insurance is a fee you have to pay up front it's a fee you have to pay if you put less than 20% down. It protects the lender against the risk of default, which is obviously higher with lower down payments. And then that leaves us with $31.50 of just principal and interest, which is just a function of your loan amount and your interest rate amortized over 30 years. And that leaves us with a total monthly payment of $37.52. If you knock off the 50, then just about $3,700 per month without that homeowner's insurance. So let's walk through the features of this loan. Again, it's a $550,000 purchase price, 15% down, and over here you can see it ended up with the same interest rate. Now, again, this is not going to be your exact interest rate, but it is a good representation of where we're at near the end of March here. And again, I explained this before, but just in case you missed it, points are credit points. Points are a fee you could pay up front to get a lower interest rate. If you just say, hey, I want to lock in a lower interest rate and I'm willing to pay $1,000 or $5,000 or sometimes even $25,000 or more, then you can do that. If you think you're going to be in this for a long time and you do the math and it makes sense, great. That's kind of the idea on points. Or sometimes there's other strategies where it makes sense. Generally, we don't recommend doing it just to do it, because usually the lenders price those so that they price how much they're going to reduce the rate, so that they tend to win on the averages. They not every time. Sometimes you can win if you know what you're doing, but the point is you should have a clear strategy and know why you're doing what you're doing. But credit is the opposite of that, which is what we end up with here. Credit is where the lender says, if you take a higher interest rate, I will cover some of your closing costs. So we end up with about $1,089 in credit. And again, talking through this before, it's pretty close to 0 points. That number could be pretty high. It just ended up there because that's the closest that the rate sheets don't always show exactly right at 0. And usually it's within $100, $200, $300 of points to get right to 0. So this is a little bit higher than normal, so I apologize for that. But so, par rate might end up a little closer to 7 than 7.125. But there's a small credit of about $1,000 there towards your closing costs. And then that leaves the last two components here that I wanted to highlight. Other closing costs of $9,831. That includes closing costs are made up of several different things, which I'm not going to get into here. There's plenty of videos you can look up on what goes into closing costs, but it's just a combination of services that go into helping you get the loan from all the parties involved, and then some prepaid costs that are not costs to get the loan. They are costs you will be paying on a regular basis, but you have to pay them ahead of time because the lender needs it in their system, because typically you'll miss the first month, and then there's other things like taxes and insurance that you have to get in their system ahead of time. So that's pretty typical. If you want to know more about that, there's plenty of videos you can look up. And then estimated cash to close, this is your total cash to close. It's the other closing costs, which is reduced a little bit by that credit here, plus your down payment. So we ended up a little below $100,000. We didn't use all of it. Theoretically, yes, we could use all of it. We could bump you up to like 15.5% or 16% down. But typically, prices change in about 5% down increments. So if you get to 16% down, it probably won't make that much of a difference. It's not going to knock off mortgage insurance. It's not going to make mortgage insurance that much lower. So the idea here is, if we can make it to 15% down, but we can't quite make it to 20 or even, something 18 or 19 significantly higher, then there's no reason to spend that cash. You can keep that cash in your pocket. It's up to you. You could end up using that if you wanted to. All right, so let's look at qualifying real quick. So just briefly, the way lenders figure out whether you qualify, it's slightly different from conventional to FHA to VA, but definitely for conventional, and it's basically the same for FHA. The way lenders figure out whether you qualify for a loan is they take your debt to income ratio, which is your total monthly debts divided by your gross monthly income. So your debt to income ratio, your DTI, is your total monthly debts divided by your gross monthly income. And this number needs to be less than 50%. For conventional specifically, it's pretty similar for FHA, and then VA is a little bit different. But so total monthly debts, this number includes this new proposed housing payment. Let's add that to any other debts you have, your credit card debt, your student loan debt, whatever other debts you have. Let's add all those debts together, including this new proposed housing payment, and divide it by your gross monthly income, and let's see if you're less than 50%. If you are, pretty much you're good to go. As far as qualifying, again, this is not an affordability rule, it's not a budgeting rule, it's just will the lender give you the loan. Whether you want to take on that loan is up to you. Alright, so if we keep that in mind and we look at these housing payments, let's look over here first, the $40,000 scenario. How much income would it take to qualify for this? Well, this, assuming, and I'm going to assume you have no other debts. So if you have other debts, you just need to add those to this top number. But if you have no other debts, no other monthly debts, then I'm going to take this top number and see, what is that 50% of? And then that number needs to be the monthly income you can hit. And I've already done it for you here. And again, this is based on with the homeowner's insurance included, which it actually wouldn't be on this scenario, so you just knock off $50 a month from this. But this is 50%, this total monthly payment of $4,205 is 50% of $8,410. So this is what you would have to be making monthly in order to qualify for this. And this income needs to be income that the lender can count on. And typically the lender has rules as far as what income would count. So if you just started a new job and it's in commission, it's primarily commission, and you're making this, but there's not a lot of history to your job, and it's not a salary, so it's not guaranteed, then it would be a little bit tougher to prove this. So you have to prove this income in order to qualify for the loan. But this is what it would take, which is about $100,920 a year. I mean, that's a pretty hefty monthly payment, so it takes a reasonable income in order to even qualify for that. And then in this scenario, $3,752 a month. If you have no other debts, you'd have to be making $7,504 per month to qualify for this loan, which is about $90,000 per year. If you want to take a look at your own income and see how much house you could qualify, if you're looking at a house right now and want to get a real quote on it, please do reach out. Or if you just have questions and want to get the conversation going and start asking questions to real people, please do reach out. We have all our contact info in the description below. Again, I work with Cleveland Street Mortgage, which is a mortgage broker team based in Bothell, Washington. We do loans in Washington and Idaho, and we have loan officers over in Idaho as well. But please do reach out. My dad has been doing this for over 25 years, almost 30 years now. He just has tons of experience and has worked with tons of people. And you can check out our website for any reviews you want to see of people's past experiences. But he knows what he's doing, and he's involved in every single loan that comes through Cleveland Street Mortgage. And we work hard to serve, to provide you really good advice and not just give you a loan and get you something that you don't really know what's going on. Of course, we're happy to get you what you want, and you're the customer, you're the one making the call at the end of the day. But we do want to provide good advice, because this is a complicated process, and each little decision along the way makes a big difference. If you want to know just before you reach out what it's like to work with us, there's a video linked in the description. You can watch a video of what our process is like with our team, and then feel free to reach out using any contact info you find there. Thanks so much for watching.